On this podcast, we spend a lot of time talking about creating, protecting, and commercialising intellectual property. But something we don't talk about nearly enough is what happens to those rights when the creator dies. That's where estate planning becomes incredibly important. Sarah Carey is a commercial lawyer who also practices extensively in estate planning, helping individuals, families, and business owners protect their assets and ensure that those assets pass to the right people in the right way. And when we talk about assets, we're not just talking about houses and bank accounts. For many people, some of their most valuable assets are intellectual property assets, copyright, trademarks, designs, confidential information, business records, and creative works that may continue generating value long after they're gone. Think about your patents, last for 20 years. Think about your designs. Think about your copyright, which might last for up to 70 years after the death of the creator. In today's episode, we're going to explore estate planning through an intellectual property lens. We're going to discuss the duties and responsibilities of executors and look at what can happen when those duties are misunderstood. We're focusing on the Victorian Supreme Court decisions in Ray Estate of Vaughan, Dunn and Vaughan, 2024 VSC 7, and Ray and Estate of Vaughan, Dunn and Dunvaughan number 2, 2024 VSC 128. The case involved the estate of a robotics inventor and allegations that documents containing valuable technical information and schematics were destroyed by an executor after receiving informal advice that copyright ended when the author died. As we'll discuss, that advice was wrong, and the consequences were significant. The decisions provide a fascinating reminder that intellectual property forms part of a deceased estate, just like any other asset, and that executors have serious obligations to preserve, protect, and properly administer those rights. They also highlight the risks that can arise when valuable knowledge, records, and intellectual property are not properly identified and managed as part of an estate plan or as part of a business succession plan. So whether you're a business owner, an inventor, a creative, or someone who may one day be responsible for administering an estate, there are some really important lessons in this case. Today, I'm delighted to have Sarah on the podcast. We're going to have a bit of a chat about IP and estate planning and executors' duties. So it's going to be great. Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Before we get started, do you just want to tell people a little bit about your journey into law and how you got into this sort of thing?
Yeah, sure. Well, when I finished school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I started off doing just a Bachelor of Business and then I majored in commercial law. So I thought, that's something I'm really interested in. So then I went and did my fully fledged Bachelor of Laws. And, I really enjoyed doing estate planning. I've helped my mother do her estate planning. And so, that's how I got into it. And I got a job at Yarra Lane and have loved it ever since.
Fantastic. So when people hear estate planning, they often think it's just about having a will. What does the estate planning actually really entail?
Yeah, look, it's not just about making a will, as you say. It's about including things like an enduring power of attorney, which covers like financial and personal matters, a medical treatment decision maker document, and those documents are used while you're alive. It's also completing your binding death benefit nominations for your superannuation and life insurance and making sure that those that you have nominated are actually entitled to receive the money, possibly completing a letter of wishes, and also just generally getting your affairs in order, such as like listing assets in your bank accounts that you may own, any shares, safety deposit boxes, and where your original will is stored. So it just makes it easier for your executors to administer your estate, which can be quite a large task.
Cool. And if you own a business perhaps, or if you've got a trust, what can you do in terms of estate planning there?
Yeah, what I would recommend you do, especially if you're a sole director of a company, then make sure you've got your corporate power of attorney in order, because it really can make it easier for your company to continue on rather than grind to a halt, especially if you've got things like employees that need to be paid.
Because the cool thing about corporate power of attorney is companies don't die, whereas a personal power of attorney will expire if you did happen to pass away, but it would give your attorney the opportunity to act in the interim before your executor has got a grant of probate.
Yeah, exactly. And also you can do things if you've got a family trust, make sure there's succession planning for them. You can do a deed of succession, or we can put that in your will as well. So just making sure all of those loose ends are tied up.
Okay, cool. Thinking about intellectual property, because that's kind of the point of the podcast. What kind of intellectual property would form part of that estate? Because obviously some things like a trademark might be owned by your company, and therefore, as we mentioned, companies don't die. What other things might exist?
Yeah, like the copyright, or the things that you have, domain names, your software, business systems, any confidential information that you hold as well.
Obviously, the confidential information is going to be a bit difficult to retrieve from the deceased, but those other things either might be personal rights or they might be assets of the company. So that would be an interesting thing. So we've been talking about executor. What does an executor do? I mean, you just mentioned it's a really big job. Let's unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, so the role of the executor is to carry out the wishes of the will and to do as specified in that will as well. It's a position of great trust, and it must be carried out with care and honesty. The executor has a fiduciary duty to act impartially for the best interests of the beneficiaries and to really avoid any conflicts. So the executor needs to call in, realise and manage and protect the assets of the estate until they're distributed to those beneficiaries. They must ensure that they maximise the value of any assets in the estate as well. And they're also responsible for ensuring that all the liabilities of the estate are paid where they're appropriate.
Okay, and what are some of the risks of being an executor, apart from a huge workload?
Yeah. They must take care when making decisions regarding the disposal of assets, is one of a really great things to think about. The executor must ensure that the assets are not wasted or diminished in the value. Otherwise, they could be personally liable for those losses to the estate.
Yeah. And so that brings us on to, I guess, one of the things we're going to talk about today, which is the case of Ray Vaughan, which was decided in 2024 in Victoria. Do you want to give us a bit of a summary or a background on this case?
Yeah, look, the Vaughan case is an excellent demonstration of how executors can be personally liable for any losses that they've caused. So just a little bit of background for this case. There was two brothers called Simon and James, and Simon was the administrator of the estate, and Vaughan was a robotics engineer. And Simon got some advice from a friend, I believe, saying that any copyright is extinguished on death, which is not correct. So what Simon did was he got some auctioneers in and he sold everything in the factory that his dad had. He sold it for about $20,000. He found some documents and things and he just thought, this is rubbish, and threw them all out. The other brother, James, he actually worked with his dad in this as a robotics inventor. And so he actually knew there may be some value in the IP of some of these documents. Anyway, so he just thought, no, these aren't worth anything. So he ended up destroying them. So James took him to court and said, nope, you need to be removed as executor. There's value in here. And the court agreed. So the court said that Simon had failed to consider, identify and value the IP. And he should have known that IP existed. He should have also known that there may have been value as well. So Simon was up for about $300,000 worth of losses, and he also had to pay some interest. Yeah, some interest as well on top of that, which ended up to be just under $420,000. So he was liable for that, and he breached his fiduciary duty to the estate.
Yeah, and I understand he was also replaced as the executor.
Yes, he was.
Yeah, fun. So why was this such a big issue in this case? Why was the intellectual property such a big issue in this case?
Because it's something that he should have realised. He should have got proper advice rather than just listening to his friend saying that the copyright didn't exist. So it's a really expensive lesson to learn that he didn't get proper advice.
And so part of what Simon's position was, he's like, oh, well, I searched on IP Australia and nothing came up. Do you have to register your copyright with IP Australia?
No, you don't. Copyright is something in Australia that doesn't need to be registered, so it's not something you can search. It's just something that you must turn your mind to if you've got some of these documents, especially if you're, someone who's creating works that could have this copyright attached.
Yeah, and so we're thinking about maybe photos. We're also thinking about videos, artworks, all that sort of stuff. Who knows?
Absolutely.
I always think about all of the that I've taken on my phone. They're not going to be worth anything to anyone, probably. But who knows? Maybe I've captured something really historic and there's value in that. Given that copyright lasts for 70 years after the death of the author, depending on the type of copyright, that's a really big thing for an executor to consider, that they might have to manage this copyright for that period of time. Can you like, if you started being an executor, can you like quit?
Yeah, you actually can quit your role as executor. What we would advise people that are considering taking up the role of executor is to do it early. If you don't do it early enough, then before probate, then you have to apply to the Supreme Court to have your position
To be
removed.
discharged, yeah.
Exactly, discharged from your role as executor.
Yeah, so what can executors learn from this case other than get some advice? About...
Yeah, they must act with skill and care, and they cannot just do things that they think may be okay. They must really take their role seriously, as they have quite a large fiduciary duty to the beneficiaries of the estate.
Yeah, which they might also be one of the beneficiaries themselves, but
yes,
it's about a responsibility to all of the other ones.
Exactly. So he had in the Vaughan case, he had a responsibility not just to himself, but also to his brother James.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what could business owners learn from this about, I know you mentioned earlier about getting your papers organised and things. That would probably be a useful lesson. What other lessons could people who are creating or have a business learn from this case?
Yeah, maybe assign those personal rights over to the businesses that you're creating the works for, so they hold the rights in them, so you can start getting royalties and things like that from them. Yeah, so just make sure that those rights are known to get, so your executors can deal with them.
And thinking about that in your estate planning phase, so having a chat, and maybe don't ask ChatGPT what I can leave in my will, but getting an estate planning lawyer to go through it with you, because I always find that people don't think about everything that they own and oftentimes leave things out.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are someone that has made artwork and things like that, you may gift it to, my daughter, Sarah. And, what does that actually entail? Is it just the artwork? Is it the artwork and the copyright?
Yeah.
And so you have to really think about it. It's not just face value. You've got to deep dive into it.
Great. Thank you so much for explaining that. That's been really helpful. What would be your one key parting piece of advice that you could give to anyone considering estate planning and the intersection of intellectual property with that estate plan?
Yeah, go and see an estate planner who knows about intellectual property is number one. Think about what you're going to give, and also think about who you are going to appoint as your executor. You could also appoint a separate executor for your copyright as well. So thinking about who would be an appropriate person to administer your estate, especially when copyright is involved.
Yeah, that's a really great idea. And if people are interested in working with you, Sarah, how can they get in touch with you?
You can link up with us on LinkedIn. We can also go to our website, which is yarralane.com.au, and get in touch with us.
Yeah, and we'll also put those details in the show notes so that people can click through to that, because I think the website might actually be Yarralane Group.
Yeah, actually, I thought that when I said that. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time. It's been really great.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for having me, Elise.
Thanks for spending time with me on Elise Explains IP. If you picked up something useful, hit follow, subscribe, leave us a review, or send it to a founder friend who could use this information. And remember, this is general information, not legal advice. If you do want help with your IP, you can book a strategy call with me at any time via my website. The link's in the description. So until next time, own your own ideas.